Welcome back to Ferrigno Freedom channel. I'm Dante Ferrigno. If you've not been here before, I'd like to introduce myself real quick. I have been on a carnivore way of eating known as a lion diet now for the past 3.5 years, and it has changed things in my life that I never thought diet would change. But that's for another video. I've been reacting to this video lately by Tucker Carlson where he interviews Calley and Casey Means, and it has been very informative for, I think, so many people in the population to be able to understand what is going on when it comes to big food, big pharma, and government, and realizing why something like a carnivore way of eating can be such a great thing for your health. There are certainly other options that are available out there to people that want to get off the train of health being a problem, food causing the problem, government working together to bring the... It's so much to explain that it's like it's too much for most people. And that's why it took a 2-hour and 20-minute video that Tucker Carlson did on this interview to be able to talk about it. Well, I've been breaking up the reaction to this video into segments because I thought this would make it a little bit easier for people to digest this video, this information, especially if they're not really interested in it, because most people are just going through life thinking, all I got to do is get what I need to eat to get through my day, and hopefully I've got some healthcare coverage and I won't have to worry about it if I get sick. But ultimately, what you'll find out is that there is no solutions to be found in a magic pill or something that our wonderful science healthcare can fix, because they're not in the business of fixing problems. It's going to come down to figuring out what the root cause is to all these chronic illnesses. And this interview reveals a lot about that. So anyway, without any further ado, I'm going to give you a quick recap on where we've been, and then we're going to jump right into today's section.
You are a Stanford-educated physician.
Patients in America are getting much sicker.
When any American gets sick with a chronic condition, they go on a lifetime medication and they keep racking up more comorbidities. But you don't die, you just suffer.
What is the highest value intervention you can do for a patient? Get them to eat healthy. Doesn't cost a lot, has incredible outcomes universally.
Our child's environment is to an unprecedented degree full of hormone-disrupting chemicals.
It is much harder as a poor American to buy food that is not poisoned because our government is making the poisoned food cheaper.
The USDA is doing marketing for ultra-processed food because 95% of the advisors on the committee are corrupted. 40% of the advisors that President Biden has already put for the next committee are paid for by the maker of Ozempic. We need actually a new paradigm of how we view chronic disease. I mean, it's actually just a lie that if you have a high cholesterol, high blood sugar, and depression, you're seeing 3 different doctors who aren't talking to each other at all. That's just wrong. It's very profitable, but it's wrong. You're on 3 different lifetime plans. You can really solve it with the root cause. And that's if the medical system was sane, with lower costs and unleash human capital. We're debating on the margins right now on the left and the right about how to change page 300 of Medicare Part D, unless we're attacking the core incentive that was embedded by Obamacare, which was probably the deadliest law passed in recent history. What Obamacare did is it ingrained the incentive that the medical system makes more money when people get sicker. Through this populist idea of like taking on the insurance companies, it said insurance companies can only make a 15% profit margin in medical loss ratio. They need to pay out 85% of their spending. But because now insurance companies can only get 15%, but by law enshrined in Obamacare, they can raise premiums to get that 15%, what's their incentive? Your incentive is for the pie to grow. Your incentive is for costs to go up. So Obamacare actually incentivized insurance companies to have no cost controls. What does no cost controls mean? It means more people getting sick. So we're talking about inflation a lot right now. By far, the top driver of inflation in America right now is healthcare. And that's happening because there's no rein on costs. There's no rein on costs because everyone makes money when we get sicker. That's
Even
how it all
insurance
connects.
companies.
And that's the key to this. And this is the key to most everything that gets passed through government these days, is the name of the bill usually does the opposite of what it implies. The Patriot Act had nothing to do with patriotism. Well, the Affordable Care Act has nothing to do with making care affordable. It was simply about paying off your cronies. It was about cronyism, just like most everything is in government these days. It has nothing to do with taking care of the people. It has nothing to do with the emphasis on helping the poor or those who are disenfranchised. It has everything to do with more money, more power, paying off those people that helped you get to your position of power and returning the favor by giving them their money and power. It has nothing to do with all the things that, this is what's so upsetting, is that some people who argue with me when I was talking about Obamacare would say, no, but it's going to help me get insurance. It's going to help me get the money to get the treatment that I need. But ultimately, that treatment is not treating anything because they're not treating the root cause. They know they're just running the bill up and they're putting it on the American taxpayer. It's the fleecing of America. It's the fleecing of any country that participates in this nonsense, because it's not about getting you healthy. It's not about helping anybody except themselves. We just need more people who are actual patriots, who are actually willing to take a stand for what's right and to say what's right even when it doesn't benefit them directly. The notion of the founders, they pledged their lives, their sacred honor, and their fortune on what they were doing. They were taking a stand for what they believed was right. And what we have today is a lot of politicians and a lot of people in positions of power who like to virtue signal that they're doing these things when they're actually doing the opposite. And it just takes getting down to the roots of it when you hear stuff like this. Somebody who worked as a lobbyist in Washington that was a part of this process that's coming out and telling the truth. When you have his sister, who is a medical doctor, who said there's something wrong with what's happening here and I can't be a part of it anymore. These are the people that we need to be listening to because they're willing to risk it all for the truth. Hey, it's Dante Ferrigno. I just wanted to thank you first of all for watching this video, but I also wanted to tell you about my merch shop. I have a link in the description for a bunch of different items I've put together for you to be able to show your support for the carnivore lifestyle, and every purchase helps me to keep doing what I'm doing here on Ferrigno Freedom.
People getting sick. So we're talking about inflation a lot right now. By far, the top driver of inflation in America right now is healthcare. And that's happening because there's no rein on costs. There's no rein on costs because everyone makes money when we get sicker. That's
so if 85% of their budget has to go to care, they take 15% by law from Obamacare. The more that we spend actually on healthcare, the more expenditures for patients, the more their 15% grows.
That's crazy. So, I mean, in a functioning system, of course, insurers would have the greatest possible incentive
Not
to
here.
keep illness down.
Obamacare, out of a populist kind of, we're gonna cap their profit margins, but they can raise prices to get that 15%. So there is zero, and I mean this, every single institution that impacts our health, insurance companies, pharma companies, hospitals, medical schools, they make more money when more Americans are sicker for longer periods of time, and they lose money when Americans get healthy.
It's just absolutely
That's
amazing.
the incentive. And then you go to Medicaid, which I talked about. There's just a huge incentive for more and more poor people to get sick because that's an annuity then to the pharma companies. So until you attack that incentive, and as Casey said, people just don't understand this. Everyone kind of makes sense. And actually, I think these things are very easy to change. But the problem is that it's enshrined that there's profit when people are sick. And then they use the Stanford and the Harvard and the AH. It's all this fancy club where people, it's like uncouth to talk. It's so marginalized when you talk about nutrition among
Wimpified.
elite. It's wimpified. It's like Casey was yelled at by an attending surgeon. You didn't go to nutrition school. Don't talk to your patients about what to eat. We do serious medicine. We commit surgery.
And it's
If they're
not
doing
in the
serious
guidelines.
medicine, then why are the outcomes getting worse?
Because they're not
working, why have
responsible.
life expectancy going down?
But the life expectancy,
They're not paid for good outcomes.
The life expectancy is the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, no, I'm aware.
That's the underlying is just mass suffering, particularly among kids. I mean, this rapid increase in childhood diabetes. If you have diabetes by the time you're 30, you die 15 years younger, and you're suffering much more along the way. And now almost, it's getting to almost the majority of young adults are pre-diabetic. So diabetes is not an isolated condition. It's cellular dysfunction, as Casey talks about in the book. It's the root of so many other things.
At breakfast, you said, I'm going to make this positive. I called my brother last night and I was like, you got to come to breakfast with the means because it'll radicalize you, which you successfully did in about an hour. So I've got two more questions for you, broad questions. Here's the first. Let's say there's a means administration. You all are given power within the bounds of our system, right? You can do what a president can do. What are the first steps you take to fix this?
Day one, state of emergency for childhood chronic disease. Fully within the Constitution for the president to declare a state of emergency for public health. That's what happened during COVID. It was no congressional legislation. It was a state of emergency. What's happening in childhood chronic disease is a much orders of magnitude bigger state of emergency right now and more imminent emergency in America than COVID. Yeah. So you declare a state of emergency.
That's for sure.
You declare a state of emergency for childhood health. We actually started a nonprofit and we have executive orders drafted. And there is so much stuff you can do, but it's attacking the incentives. For starters, Biden's talked about this and President Trump's talked about it. But I think the fact that you need a president there who's willing to take some heat from these ingrained industries, you could sign a bill tomorrow saying pharma companies can't charge Americans more than what they charge people in Europe. We are spending, in some cases, 10 times more on drugs. We are subsidizing the largest companies in Europe with our insanity. That's not a free market. Tomorrow, you can cut this ridiculous thing.
You can thank the Republicans for that, by the way.
No, it's both sides. Paul Ryan and
No, but
it doesn't get to the root of the free market issue, but it's a step in the right direction. That's probably the best way I can say it. I don't like using force to make things happen, but the problem is we've got a system that forces the bad things to happen. We've got to be able to undo that force of doing things the wrong way, of making the system appear to be a free market when it's not a free market at all. And also having so many people taking credit for all the work they've done as the leader of this or the politician that did that. They're not actually doing anything to solve any problems. Again, they're just repaying their donors. They're just repaying those people who are paving the path for their rise to power. They're not doing anything for the people who think that they are. They think that there's something free to be gotten from these people. There is nothing that's free. There is nothing that these people can do for you except make your life worse, because they don't have anything in their promises. Their promises are all empty. And they don't even have to be good at hiding it anymore, because the national news media is complicit in the whole plan because they're getting paid by Big Pharma. Just look at all the ads on national news for that stuff. I'm not getting paid hardly anything from YouTube. So whatever ads you're seeing on YouTube, the only thing I'm incentivized to do from the money I get from YouTube for the ads that run on my stuff is to be as honest as I can, to be as forthright as I can, to be as transparent as I can, to be as real as I can, because I think people are hungry for authenticity and somebody who's willing to speak the truth. And that's what keeps me coming back. And it's also the thing that's probably going to get me shut down on YouTube at some point, because I think the powers that be aren't really for somebody that speaks the truth. But you know what? I'm not worried about it. If that happens, that happens. The Lord will take care of me somewhere else. I'm going to go down speaking the truth.
Republicans, I will say, as a lifetime Republican voter, but they provided the ideological cover for that, because they said, I was there when this happened, in Hillary Care, Obamacare, so between 1993 and 2011, they made this case consistently through their think tanks that it was a choice between socialism and capitalism. And if you were controlling costs, that was socialism.
It's socialism for pharma to have Congress over a barrel and not.
Oh, I'm very aware. It was the opposite of truth.
I was working for conservative think tanks trying to make that argument. It's totally bankrupt. And actually, President Trump's talked about that. That's an executive order he can sign the first day.
Sorry, I'm still mad about that.
It's crazy. I cannot emphasize this enough, how important it is just for medical leaders to cite the science. An executive order tomorrow could make it that USDA panelists cannot take money from food companies. What an idea. It can sign an executive order tomorrow that NIH grants can't go to conflicted researchers. 80% of them currently go to conflicted researchers. You could sign an executive order tomorrow that the FDA should stop being funded by pharma.
75% of their funding comes from pharma.
And there's a revolving door, as we all know, where people go from the FDA to pharma. Institutions in the DC, as we both know, are built to grow. The FDA grows when the pharma's influence grows. The FDA should be an independent organization. It's not. That's an executive order tomorrow. So you just rob the conflicts of interest out of these things. Personnel. Assign doctors that we both know onto the USDA nutrition panel, and have the president, have the secretary of the treasury, because we're going bankrupt from healthcare costs, have the secretary of defense, because 77% of young adults aren't eligible to join the military. Have them say, we are not banning any company. We're not even giving public policy recommendations, but we are saying from a medical perspective that we should reduce ultra-processed food consumption among children. That is a medically valid statement, and medical leaders need to start telling the truth. And then public policy, I'm fine with the public policy chips, fall where they may. But the president, the secretary of defense, the head of the NIH, the head of the FDA should be saying the medical truth. The most important dynamic in America, I believe, is when a child or a parent is sitting across from their doctor at the first stage of metabolic dysfunction. They're shoved into a one-size-fits-all process right now where they immediately get on a pharmaceutical treadmill. The medical guidance comes from the NIH, the FDA, and their associated groups like the American Diabetes Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics. That guidance itself is corrupt and says that Ozempic, is the cure for obesity and statins and heart disease. If a doctor was recommending the right things, we'd be a healthier country. So you just have to go after the medical guidelines. That would transform the country. The last one.
That sounds pretty good to me. I mean, a lot of the stuff where you're using policy to dictate things, like he mentioned not banning. I'm all for that. I don't think we should be banning things. I don't think we should be using force to get people to do anything. We're not supposed to. I don't think we should force them to eat food that's not processed any more than we should force them to eat food that is processed. What's happening is essentially they're being forced to eat food that is processed because the medical guidelines say that. So I can see what he's saying. I'm more along the lines of the way Malay thinks about it down in Argentina. When he talks about all these different agencies, I see the FDA as not needing to be reformed. It just needs to be afuera. You tear it out and throw it away because it's not doing what it's supposed to do. As a matter of fact, it's doing the opposite of what it's supposed to do. So you just cut it off. You just get rid of it because it's not necessary if it's doing damage to the system. It kind of reminds me of once when I was very young, I bought a Camaro and it needed to have some part put on it so that it could pass an exam in the state I was living in so that I could drive it. And then they had me put this part on there that cost me $300. And it was an emissions type of thing that didn't really change much of anything, except it took away all the horsepower my engine had. And I thought, I'm paying to ruin the ability of my car to function like it should? Just because, I mean, when I think about the way government has been working is it's loaded with those type of things that are not necessary to make anything actually function better, but are necessary to make your life more difficult. They're the chains that government puts on us, and there's so many chains now, people can't even move through the process. I mean, daily life is hard enough. Getting a business going is hard enough without having to carry around all the burden of these ridiculous regulatory agencies that aren't actually doing anything that's good for the people. It's only good on paper. It's only good in the name of the bill that's being passed. It doesn't actually help anybody with anything except for certain people to make a lot of money and other people to get a lot of power. That's what it comes down to. So I say just get rid of it. Government, get out of the way. There's my old laissez-faire speech. We'll leave it at that. The Carnivore Bar, compared to movie theater snack prices, it's no competition. With a tub of popcorn running you over $14, I'd much rather enjoy the salty, crunchy, meaty goodness of a carnivore bar any day. And I don't have to cheat to enjoy my night out. Carnivore Bar. Save 10 to 20% when you use my link in the description of this video.
Say just going after incentives, I think it's a huge deal that our information sources have been totally co-opted.
Yeah.
50%
I can speak
of
to that
TV,
directly,
50% of TV news spending, coming from pharma is a huge deal. And why the hell is our media playing referee for defending pharmaceutical companies? Why
are they suppressing?
And silencing
Why
doctors?
are they suppressing
Yeah.
any questions around that? That's a huge problem that our dominant information sources for the past generation have been able to be co-opted by an industry that, just as a statement of economic fact, profits from Americans getting sick. That was actually D2C pharma advertising was an executive order from Reagan. It could be an executive order tomorrow. It's actually beautiful. You would cut 50% of mainstream media revenue and be on the moral high ground. That's absolutely something. So stop recommending the bad stuff and stop subsidizing. There's also a host of things you can do. Before we get into any taxes, any bans, which I'm not even interested in talking about, Coke should exist, but it shouldn't be subsidized by food stamps. It shouldn't be recommended by the USDA as something okay for kids. It shouldn't be funded billions of dollars by the federal government, right? These things just shouldn't be incentivized and fun. So we have a whole host of executive orders to cut the recommendations, to cut the conflicts, and then cut the incentives for these things.
When do we get to put the corrupt doctors in jail?
So you go to the motivations a lot. I think, again, the systemic genius of the whole system is that it gives people plausible deniability. I would say, though, to add on to what Casey was saying earlier, that there's knowledge and we do need to start holding people accountable.
Well, and your sister's like the perfect example. It's like I just so strongly identify with the world you grew up in because I know it so well. And you just you were the highest achiever in your neighborhood. and you find that the system you're living in is incompatible with your values. It's morally unacceptable to you, and you opt out, but you're the only one who opts out. So that raises questions about like everyone who didn't opt out. I'm sorry, it does.
I've got a dark stat for you. We talk about this in the book. The highest suicide rate of any profession in America is doctors.
Really?
And the highest burnout rate.
I always heard it was dentists. I guess that's changed since then, but anyway.
So what I see with that is that working hard doesn't make you super depressed and suicidal. Like missionaries aren't committing suicide. Right. Yeah. I'm working hard on this mission. I feel really good about it.
Me too.
They actually had a New York Times article recently that identified what doctors are feeling towards soldiers. It's the same psychological dynamic that soldiers who get in the fight for the right reasons, but then are forced by their superiors to commit war crimes. It's actually similar. The New York Times.
It's violating your conscience. It's doing something that violates what you know is right. Because it's so easy to choose to do that with the way the system is set up right now, that if you go along, you get the wheels greased ahead of you so that you're able to get on that fast track. You're making money, you're rising in power, you're rising in prestige. All of those things are what lead us down that path, but you're violating your conscience. And the more you violate your conscience, the more you hate yourself. You'll wind up having self-loathing, and it is so detrimental to your soul and your spirit that it can drive you that way. And I think a lot of us in daily life realize that we are violating our conscience with the small decisions we're making on what we consider our small jobs. But those are the areas where we're going to win this battle, is when you start to say, no more. I am not lying to get ahead. I am not going to do whatever it takes to get ahead. I am going to speak the truth in my life and let the chips fall where they may. When more people start doing that, that's when we're going to turn things around. It isn't going to be because some politician did something. It's not going to be because some law did something. It's because individual people decided they were going to get serious about integrity. That's what I believe. Let me know what you think in the comments.
Compare doctors to like Abu Ghraib, like soldiers who were forced to do horrible things or felt like they were forced. That's, I think, what's happening to the medical profession is these are all good people. There's much easier ways to make money. We actually are this magnet that attracts the best and the brightest from all of the world.
Agree.
We saddle them with debt. They have no other skills, and then they have societal expectations from their parents and all these credentials, but they do feel trapped. So I hope, it's certainly inspiring to me, it changed my whole life kind of learning from Casey's story. I hope more and more people realize that there's light moving away from this system. And I always go back to Elon. Remember when he said, you're speaking out about all these issues you care about, but advertisers are flocking away from you. And he goes, I don't give a fuck. Yeah. That's the attitude we need in the healthcare industry. We need some people with that type of attitude, because it's the same thing. It's like, well, all these children are dying, but what are you going to, it's like, well, they're playing along with it. I'm talking to senior people at pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies. Everyone knows what's going on. It's like, it's hard. We don't know what to do. We need some leadership. Yeah. We need some leadership. But again, with simple executive orders, you can start changing these incentives. Yeah. You can start changing them.
No, you're right, and I think I'm too judgmental. I mean, I participated in an enormously corrupt system for my entire life. So, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Calley's talking about with the incentives is absolutely key. Why is 75% of the FDA budget coming from pharma? But I think there's a couple other things we could also sort of do to really change things. I mean, one is that we need to stop recommending added sugar to 2-year-olds, 10% of our diet. So that's easy, right? Like the science supports that. And actually, when we were creating the 2020 to 2025 food guidelines for America, the medical advisory board to that panel said that we should absolutely reduce sugar recommendations from 10% to 6% of total calories. And it was rejected by the USDA, even though the doctors said to do it. So all these conflicts, we need to get the sugar out of that, because then it'll get, we'll have better school lunches, and we will not be telling parents that it's okay to give your kid 10% of their calories at 2 years old from added sugar. Also, I think there's something really interesting we can do by actually using the existing tax and legal system to incentivize healthy purchases. Because right now, the healthier things are more expensive. And that's a problem. And that's because of our farm bills. So we need to change the farm bills, but we also need to give people more flexibility to use tax-free dollars to buy healthy products like organic food. And Calley has started an incredible company called TrueMed, which is helping to allow this to happen. Why is it that we can use our HSA, FSA funding to buy drugs, but we can't use it to buy organic food? This is crazy. Like, this should be what we spend our tax advantage dollars on. So things like that, creating more patient choice with HSAs. And I think, we also need to talk about things like food marketing to children. We're one of the only developed countries that's allowing our TVs, Nickelodeon, for 28% of the ads to children to be ultra processed foods that we know are associated with chronic disease. And so there's other things I think that would be very high yield that are just very basic. Let me just give you one example that I think will be really relevant to people listening. Infertility is a huge issue. As Casey mentioned, PCOS, which is the leading cause of.
Before he gets into that one example, let me back up just a little bit. What she's talking about, those HSAs and things like that, I kind of see those as all being very similar to the example I made earlier when it came to the Camaro and the emissions equipment. When you start putting all this stuff on there that kills the engine's ability to function properly, it's not about changing the way it works to work better. It's about getting it off of there, getting that stuff out of the system. It's still a start. It's a step in the right direction. I mean, if we've already got these HSAs and things like that, which I don't understand because I don't have anything like that. I mean, a lot of you may not realize, I don't want to get into what my personal situation is, but I am not a man of means of any kind. I don't have that FU money that Elon Musk has to where he can tell him I don't care because he's the richest man in the world. So I can relate to the situation that many of you people are in as you sit there and watch this and you say, yeah, you can do that because you've got whatever. I don't have that whatever. I don't have that financial backdrop. I am just willing to risk my life for the truth. I'm willing to take a stand for the truth. And that's what we need more people to be able to do. Now, when it comes to these policy things, I may not like the overall solution, but it's better than what we got. So I can support what she's saying about using those tax deferred dollars or whatever to be able to use it for things that are actually good rather than the things that actually exacerbate the problem. That is a step in the right direction. But I would just as soon see us get away from all these controls, get away from all of this stuff that we think is going to help keep us safe because it has no means to keep us safe, first of all, and it's not working. Afuera! Just get rid of it.
There's other things I think that would be very high yield that are just very basic. Let me just give you one example that I think will be really relevant to people listening. Infertility is a huge issue. As Casey mentioned, PCOS, which is the leading cause of female infertility, 25%.
Can you explain what that is?
Yes. So very good question. So PCOS is the leading cause of female infertility. Anyone listening of childbearing age will know about this. It's an epidemic right now. It's gone up. It's multiples in the past generation.
What does it stand for?
Polycystic ovarian syndrome.
So
cysts.
That question you just asked, I know OBGYNs from Harvard who could not answer that question. This is not an exaggeration. OBGYNs are not taught what the condition is. They're only taught what the intervention is.
Okay, so let's always start. I know nothing about medicine or science, but I do know about interviews. Always start with the dumb questions first.
Good.
If you can't answer the dumb questions, I don't believe you.
So when a woman, and many women listening will have PCOS and across their OBGYN, they're put on a cascading set of interventions that are pharmaceutical.
Can you just tell me what it is?
Yeah, it's insulin resistance. It is not related to insulin resistance, which is on the spectrum of diabetes. It is insulin resistance. PCOS is a metabolic condition. Casey can speak a little bit more to it, but it's fundamentally related to the scene.
What is it? Can you just describe its symptoms and
Absolutely.
its effect?
So PCOS, essentially you have an ovary. That ovary is making hormones. And when that ovary is stimulated by excess insulin, which is the hormone in the blood that helps us take blood sugar out of the blood and into the cells, insulin levels go up in the setting of metabolic dysfunction. We basically destroy our cells with our toxic food and lifestyle. The cells can no longer process sugar to energy. So the cell rejects sugar and it stays in the bloodstream. The body compensates by making more insulin to try and drive the sugar into the cell that's putting up a block because it's broken, essentially. That high insulin floats all around the body and does bad things all over the body, like drives cancer growth and also stimulates the ovary to make more testosterone. So you have women who are supposed to be making, estrogen and progesterone in very specific levels throughout the hormone cycle so that we can ovulate. And instead, insulin is driving the ovary to create testosterone, which totally disturbs the balance between all the sex hormones in the female body, and we don't ovulate. So you get these cysts that form because you've got an egg trying to basically ovulate, but instead it can't because the hormones are disrupted because of insulin, which is because of metabolic dysfunction, because of our food. And we get infertility because we're not ovulating. So
Lucky Charm.
I had an entire video I put out talking about insulin resistance when I covered a book by Dr. Ben Binkman. Now, he's a PhD doctor, not a medical doctor, but I don't think that distinction is really as important as some people try to make out, because he is on the cutting edge of a lot of this research involving insulin. And the thing about insulin is it's not an enemy for us. It's an important hormone that our body produces for a reason. It's just that we're getting way too much of it. And insulin tells organs to grow. It's one of the reasons why kids are entering puberty so much earlier, is their hormones are telling their cells to produce quicker in their organs, and their organs are developing quicker than they should. So they're entering puberty earlier. Now, there were some other reasons that she mentioned earlier that are also exacerbating that. But insulin is a huge factor in this. And insulin is raised when we're taking in too much sugar. And our cells, like she said, there's only so many receptors on a cell for insulin. There's more receptors when it becomes insulin resistant, because where it used to maybe take 2 insulin molecules to go into the cell and tell it to open up and let sugar from the bloodstream into the cell, now it needs 5 insulin molecules to do the same thing. And then as you keep adding more insulin to the system to overcome that, you require the cells to add more receptors. So it keeps needing more and more and more. It just exacerbates the problem. So it's like fighting fire with fire when you keep adding more insulin to the situation. Well, that's what eating all this sugar and processed food and starch and everything that converts to glucose in the blood needs insulin for, is you wind up getting way too much of it. So, and I know there's a lot of ladies out there struggling with that cystic ovarian thing. I can't remember all the letters the way they go, but I know that that's been something my wife has been concerned about, because other ladies in her family have dealt with that. And it's not a hereditary issue as much as it is a diet issue. And it can really be a life-saving thing for a lot of It can really be a life-changing thing for a lot of women and a lot of men, even though it's not dealing with the ovaries. It deals with how our organs are working. It deals with our prostate, and it deals with our liver, and it deals with our kidneys. It deals with all of our organs that are not functioning properly because they're growing faster than they should. They're aged beyond what we are because of too much insulin. Insulin resistance is a huge part of the picture here.
Which leads over time.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%. It's our
this condition is reversible in as
Quickly.
little as 12 weeks with dietary interventions. There is peer-reviewed studies to show this. If we get our blood sugar levels under control and our insulin levels under control, we restore the hormonal balance. And many women, all the symptoms will disappear and they'll be able to become fertile. And yet doctors do not learn. The average doctor is getting zero education in nutrition. And so they don't even see this. They reach for the clomiphene, the metformin. The treatment that the OBGYNs are giving to these women is a diabetes drug. And they're not talking about blood sugar.
Sorry, sometimes the closed captioning is ridiculous. It said the treatment that the Obi-Wans, they're Star Wars characters now.
The OBGYNs are giving to these women is a diabetes drug. And they're not talking about blood sugar. I started a company called Levels, which consumerizes access to a device called a continuous glucose monitor. There are so many women in our community who have PCOS, whose doctors who want to understand their blood sugar so that they can naturally heal their PCOS.
Yes, and have babies.
And these are not devices that they will give to, they'll only give it to late stage type 2 diabetics, even though we know that PCOS is insulin resistance. And that if we can monitor our blood sugar with this device and get our blood sugar under better control, it can absolutely set us up to sort of naturally heal. But it's not being talked about by the OBGYNs because doctors are not trained to see this.
This is everything, right? This connects everything.
Whoa!
This is the future of our CCs, right? This is fertility.
This topic, any woman dealing with infertility, this connects everything because the doctor doesn't know what Casey just described. Look, we've talked to them. They don't know. They did not learn the physiology of why people actually get this condition. And they eat what they kill. So what do they want more than anything? They want an IVF procedure. They want
They eat what they kill is something he referenced earlier in the previous parts that I've covered, where basically that the medical system is broken up into so many little parts that everybody is a specialty in that area. They're only going to make money if they provide something within their specialty. They're not going to make anything if they revert them back to something that's actually going to maybe fix the problem, or to some other specialist who's going to eat what they kill.
invasive surgical procedure.
IVF.
Of course.
I mean, assisted reproductive
gold mine.
technology is skyrocketing clinics
From
all
an
over the world.
economic perspective, it's a gold mine. If that woman goes on a keto diet, which is the best reversal technique for a PCOS ever studied, 12 weeks, they are robbing that doctor, just from an economic perspective, of tens of thousands of dollars for a gruesome invasive IVF procedure, which is a great procedure. But I think we all should agree, like that woman across the table would love to hear that there's a more natural way and just the correct way to reverse this condition, which
That is 100% why I still talk about a carnivore way of eating, because of what it's done for me in all those health issues. There was a natural solution, and it certainly wasn't being helped by the healthcare system. So this is a very similar argument for why I would say a carnivore way of eating can lead you to this, because there's no sugar coming into your diet this way. The only sugar that winds up in your blood is produced by your liver. And that is natural. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have to consume sugar to have energy. I'm proof of it. I don't consume sugar and I have energy. So, and it's been going on for 3.5 years. And I'm not the only one. And I'm not even the one that's been doing this the longest. There are tons of examples out there of people who have been doing this for a very long time. I just get tired of the same old argument that you don't need to go carnivore to do this. Carnivore is going to be probably required for a lot of people to undo the damage that has been done. I can't look at history and say that everybody ate meat all the time, because clearly throughout history, people have eaten fruits and vegetables and berries and bread. But it's not the same as what we've got on the table today. It's not even the same as what you can raise yourself if you're trying to be very careful. The stuff we have today is genetically modified. It's crossbred. It has been altered to be sweeter, more toxic, and then on top of that, it's sprayed with pesticides and herbicides that you can't get out of that when you send it to market. We're digesting all of that stuff, and it's destroying us. And even when you try to grow it yourself, it is still changed from what it originally was. I mean, if you look at what a carrot today looks like as opposed to a carrot from ancient times, they don't look like the same thing. And there's a reason why that was considered poor man's food, because that was all that you could eat, was basically what was good for the animals to eat that you were supposed to eat. So that kind of addresses a little bit the argument that I hear about people that want to say you need to bring vegetables in or you don't need to bring vegetables in. I'm going to tell you right now, you don't need to eat vegetables. The only reason you may need to eat vegetables or fruit or bread is if you just can't afford to eat meat. And for a lot of people, that is not really the case. Most of us can't afford to do hardly anything we want to do. But when it comes right down to it, we're going to eat something one way or the other. It's not like people in first world countries are going hungry. If you begin rearranging your life around a carnivore way of eating, though, yes, your grocery bill is going to go up, but you're going to see reductions in so many other areas, including healthcare and the need for insurance and the need for all of this other stuff that's being advertised to you all the time, that you're going to realize you don't need all of that junk anymore. You don't need nicotine to get you through the day. You don't need all the painkillers to make you feel better. You don't need the marijuana to make you be able to relax a little bit because you've made yourself healthy. You don't need all that stuff, so you don't have to buy all those other things anymore. And that's what's missing from people's thinking on this. Well, anyway, I get off my high horse. Let's finish this.
By the way,
There are big time downsides to IVF.
of
And
course,
not to mention, if the woman
IVF is in vitro fertilization, for those of you who are not aware. I found something recently that I didn't know Redmond was making, and it's called earth powder. Earth powder is bentonite clay, non-GMO xylitol, sea salt, peppermint essential oil, and menthol. I just want to say that earth powder has become my favorite toothpaste, and since it's made by the same company that I buy my favorite salt from, Redmond, I can definitely recommend it to you too. So if you're looking for something that's great for keeping your teeth clean and not full of all kind of chemicals and fluoride and stuff that you don't need in your body, check out Earth Powder at redmond.life, and you can use my discount code Dante, D-A-N-T-E, to save 15% on your order. Woo! I love that fresh feeling.
If the woman doesn't heal the underlying metabolic issues, it's going to portend issues for the baby too. Like not healing the root, even if you get pregnant with IVF, which is wonderful if that can happen, if you're not healing the root cause issues of the metabolic dysfunction, that's affecting the fetus and affecting the mom's future risk of disease. So by ignoring this, we're just continuing to put people on this treadmill. This is what happened to my mom. And I just want to be super clear, like, the picture of doctors here is very negative. But like, again, I just want to emphasize, like, doctors are not doing this nefariously. Like, there is just systemic I
think some of them are, but not all of them. Most of them are not. I agree with her about that. But I've met some doctors that they're bought in and they don't want to argue with you about it because they see the truth and they don't want to be confronted with the truth. So they, like, for instance, I had a urologist once, simply from asking a few questions. He told me, I'm not the urologist for you. I'm going to get you out of here and you're not going to be billed for this appointment. I don't want you to come back. That's the kind of doctor that I would say is in it for the nefarious reasons, because he doesn't want anybody challenging his integrity, because he doesn't want to face the fact that he has none. So there are doctors out there who are doing this for nefarious reasons that only want the money and don't care about people. But I tend to believe that most people in the medical field got into that field because they wanted to help people. And now a lot of them are just playing the game because they don't know any other way to do it. And they're afraid to take a stand. Well, if somebody doesn't have courage and take a stand, then we're all going to suffer for it.
Disease. So by ignoring this, we're just continuing to put people on this treadmill. This is what happened to my mom. And I just want to be super clear, like, the picture of doctors here is very negative. But like, again, I just want to emphasize, like, doctors are not doing this nefariously. Like, there is just a systemic misunderstanding. And there are many doctors who are waking up and teaching themselves these types of things, but it is still very fringe and small. And
well, their vacation houses are paid for by committing more interventions. They are
it's
highly
easy for me to
incentivized.
judge them because I don't know them.
Well,
but I just want to refer you back to your own life and the decisions you made.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be very hard for a lot of people. And you had advantages, as you've said. On the other hand, you're the only person I've ever met who's done that. And that's pretty discouraging. That's a pretty discouraging.
There is a tribe. I will say it's happening. There is a tribe. It's coming from the bottom up. This is functional medicine. You spoke with, Mark Hyman, for instance.
Yeah.
Like, there are people, there is a movement. It's happening. And you look at what's happening in independent media. You're talking about this. Joe Rogan's talking about this. People care. People are listening and people are waking up. But
well, it's not a boutique issue.
No.
It's the numbers are
Americans
so
want to be healthy. That's the thing. Doctors are trained to think patients are non-compliant and lazy. That is not true.
People are flocking to
Americans want to be healthy, but the entire system's rigged.
Okay, so that leads me to my last topic.
Okay, I'm going to cut it off here so that we can finish up this part on the next section. Well, I would encourage you guys, before you go, check out my website, ferrignofreedom.com. I have on there a lot of information about the diet that I've been doing. I also have a lot of products that I use on this way of living that have made it easier for me to change my lifestyle around a carnivore way of eating, because it really does require a lifestyle change. We've got so much going on today. I mean, my time is pressed from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed. If you're interested in going on this type of way of eating, and you're looking for easier shortcuts to that, I have them available for you on my website. I have the products that I have used that have helped me to be able to fit this into a busy daily schedule. Because making meat on a grill or cooking and cleaning up grease and stuff like that all the time can be difficult. Plus, you've got to kind of rethink how you cook meat. A lot of people are using marinades and all kind of junk in their meat that just ruins the flavor as far as I'm concerned. But I'll talk about that in all my videos. There's an entire page on my website that goes through every one of my videos on YouTube that's easily searchable chronologically so that you can see the information that you might be looking for from me. And if you can't find it in my 600 plus videos, there's also options to be able to come, whether it's once a month or once a week, to be able to talk in a group session with me. And then there's also options where we can even do one-on-one discussions about what might be able to help you on this way of eating. I'm not a registered nutrition anything. I'm not a doctor. I have just been able to change my life in a way that has been miraculous to me, and I want to be able to encourage others who are trying to do the same thing. So those options are all available at ferrignofreedom.com. I hope you'll check it out. Anyway, that's all I've got for this one, guys. I appreciate you. Have a good one.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?